Welcome to Forging a Life podcast with Coach Christine Clark. Forging a Life is a Sunglow transformation production aired on Transformation Talk Radio and all your favorite podcast platforms. If you own a business, have a side hustle, desire to make the leap into self-employment, or just love human interest stories, Forging a Life podcast is for you. Christine Clark is an internationally certified transformational life coach. She is the coach for your entrepreneurial life, and these are her people. Jump into the fire with those forging success on their own terms with courage, tenacity, and resilience. These are men and women you could easily meet on the street in your own community. Gain wisdom, insight, knowledge, and inspiration each episode as these business owners get transparent with Coach Christine Clark, sharing their passions, challenges, and origin stories. This is Forging a Life.
Hello, this is Coach Christine Clark. Welcome to Forging a Life with Coach Christine. My amazing guest today is somebody who I absolutely relish, is Terry Knipshield. He is a custom knife maker. He has made straight knives, folding knives that were beautiful, and now he makes a full-time living making leather tools. And I met Terry years and years ago through Howard, my husband, when we were doing knife shows. Terry actually came to one of the knife making seminars that we put on here at the shop, and been good friends ever since. So Terry, I am delighted to have you here with me today, and having the conversation. So this is great. This is great.
Thank you for having me.
Tell people, where are you at? Let people know where you work out of.
Okay, I'm in Rochester, Minnesota.
Okay.
That's southeast Minnesota corner, and this is my hometown. I was born here, so.
Okay, I wondered how, because I knew that you and Mary have been there forever. I didn't know if you were born and raised there or not. So the answer is yes.
both of us are natives.
Wonderful. That is cool. That is cool. You know, I wrote a blog post about you.
You did?
2 years ago. I had mentioned you in one, and I remember sending it to you saying, hey, I did this, hope you don't mind.
Oh, no.
But I remember, you know, because I was in the blog, and I actually pulled it up so I could take a look at it today. And
really?
we obviously had been together at a show or something and had the conversation. But the blog was just about how you don't actually just fall into something doesn't land in your lap, that it takes, you know, it takes work, it takes claiming opportunity. And what I know about you is that, you know, you started making knives sometime in the 80s. What moved you to begin doing that? Because I know that you were working full time and that was not a happy place.
No, it was a pretty toxic environment the last 15 years. But how I got started in knife making in general, I discovered a home movie of me, and I think I must be 3, and I'm all bundled up in a snowsuit like Christmas Story, you know, can hardly move. And I was out on the sidewalk, and I was throwing something at the snowbank on the boulevard. And then I walk over and I pick something up, and then I go back to the edge of the sidewalk and throw it again. And I thought, what am I doing there? And I realized that it was a rubber knife, a toy that
you're practicing knife throwing.
Yes,
at 3.
I'd seen it on TV, and I thought it looked cool, so I wanted to do it. And so my interest in knives, I think, you know, my first exposure was television. And even though we had 3 channels back then, they had enough programming so that occasionally you'd find an old Western or something where somebody was throwing a knife or using a knife. And I just thought that knives in general were just really cool. And I started out with just purchasing finished blades, and then I put handles on them, and I'd sell them next to nothing at work or to friends. And then finally somebody said, well, why don't you put your name on this knife? And I said, well, I can't, I didn't make the blade. And then I thought to myself, well, why not make the blade? And so I started looking into things and made some crude examples with the equipment I had, and then finally kept upgrading and upgrading and upgrading until I was doing my own heat treating and grinding. And there wasn't a lot of instruction back then.
No, right. Yeah, because I remember Howard was getting started probably around the same time.
Sure.
And if you knew somebody who was making knives,
Yeah,
you could
right.
ask
And
that
I did.
person and figure it out.
Sure.
So what was what was the time span from when you decided to start making your own blades to when you said like
Not
you kind of got
about
outfitted?
6 months to a year. Making a knife from a prepared handle was a finished blade was satisfying, but not enough. And so being that I'd been following knives and knife makers I think my grandpa had all these, he always had these men's magazines, True, and they're pulp magazines, but they always had articles in them occasionally about a knife maker. And of course I asked to keep that magazine. And so I was familiar with the big names back then, and I saw pictures of their work and I thought, that's what I want to make. And I was dismal to begin with, but I purchased a video actually from a knife maker down in Texas. And it was so good, it was like I was looking over his shoulder, and my grinding improved 1,000% overnight.
Oh, wow. Just
literally.
be able to watch and pick up a technique. Yeah.
Yes, I could see the process.
Uh-huh.
And so therefore I now had the confidence to realize that I had control over this process. It wasn't just I had to make do with what turned out. I could control that. And so then I just started to refine my techniques and hunting knives to begin with, a few fillet knives. And then, of course, I got into the folders. R.B. Johnson taught me how to make those. And then
so when did you go to like your first show? Because you were, originally you were putting handles on pre-made blades and just for, like you said, people at work and people in your area. So when did you go to a show?
This is kind of a funny story.
Oh, good.
I applied for membership in the guild, in the Knife Makers Guild, 1989.
Okay.
And as you had to attend 2 shows before they voted you in. So I couldn't have been voted in as a full-time voting member until 91. But I was there in 89. And lo and behold, they put my table right next to Jim Pugh and his wife, Ramon. Jim was one of the founding members of the guild and did exquisite work. But just a very nice man, made me feel very comfortable. And he asked me that same question. He said, well, Terry, how many shows do you do? And I said, well, this is my first. And he said, I know it's your first guild show, but how many shows? And I said, no, this is my first knife show.
This is it.
And he started laughing. He said, damn, boy, he says, nothing like starting at the top,
Right, because that's a big show. It draws lots of talent.
Well, I wanted to join the guild because my heroes were in the guild,
Right.
And, the Knife Makers Guild show was my first knife show. I never sold my work other than just word of mouth and friends before
Right.
that.
So you dived in big time just because that's what you knew, those people that you wanted to emulate,
Yeah.
did the
Well,
guild
I didn't
show,
know any
so
better.
that's what I'm gonna do. What?
I just didn't know any better.
No, that's perfect. That's perfect. That's way better than, well, some of the people that I coach and they want to hold back and hold back. And it's like, no, just go for it and just go.
Well,
Right.
yeah, I didn't even look at it like that. I was just thrilled to be associated with the guild at that time in some way.
Yeah.
And uh, I I think the year before I went to Florida and had an armful of knives. You know, to be approved, you had to have various makers look at your work
Hmm.
and say, yeah, I'll sign you on as a probationary member. And of course, I think Jim Miller was one and R.B. Johnson was another. Jimmy Lyle signed for me. And then the fellow who created the video signed for me.
That's kind of big time for Lyle to be signing for you because he's a big name.
Well, yeah. And I just thought, what the heck? I just walked up to him at his table and I said, Mr. Lyle, I'm trying to get into the guild, and would you mind looking at my work and seeing if you would sign for me?
Oh,
He was very gracious. Oh, of course. He said, come on, bring it over, come around here, and took me behind the table and looked at my work and made a few comments. Didn't have a lot of criticism, but of course I knew I had a long way to go, but they were very gracious, and that was how I got my start.
cool. And then I know that you did the Badger show in Wisconsin for many, many years.
And Edgerton for
Edgerton,
that,
that's right.
yeah.
It was in Edgerton and then it was in Janesville. Yeah. And
Oh, it was
I,
local.
yeah,
You know,
right.
it was, yeah, and both sets of grandparents lived in Madison, Wisconsin. That's where my folks are from.
So you made some straight knives, you said fillet knives,
Yes,
and then moved into folding knives. So
right.
what were, early on, what were some of the knives you enjoyed making most? What was,
Well, what I wanted to do was I wanted to make a knife that looked like Bob Lovelace made. He was perhaps my biggest inspiration as far as design. I looked at his designs and I said, that's what a knife should look like to me. And so I started making drop point hunters, which is his invention and specialty. And so that's pretty much what I was making. I did a couple of my own that were just my versions, or slimmed down, made longer, made shorter, that kind of variation. But basically just a very clean utilitarian knife is what I was interested. I was never interested in doing art knives. That
right?
just didn't appeal to me. I thought nobody's going to pay big bucks and then take their knife out on a hunt and use it in the field because they don't want to damage their investment.
Right.
I
And you didn't want to make things that are going to live in a box.
no, and I frankly wanted the satisfaction of knowing that they used my knife and liked it.
Right. Yeah. So then when you moved into folding knives, what was the
Yeah.
draw for that?
Again, I still have knives that I bought when I was 10, 11 years old, as soon as I was allowed to have a knife. And in those days, every boy had a knife and every boy took it to school. It was expected that if the teacher needed to open a box, she'd say to the class, which one of you boys will loan me your knife? And of course, all the hands would go up and you felt really good if the teacher used your knife to open the box or cut the string or whatever it was.
Right.
That's quite a bit different now. Unfortunately, it's
But having a folding pocket knife in your pocket, that was just what every kid had.
every kid had one. Yeah. I mean, a lot of us were in Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, and you had a little clip that you put on your belt loop that let your scout knife dangle, and that was part of the uniform.
Right.
So, and we never even conceived of using it improperly or against somebody. It was a tool.
Right. Right.
So, so I have all these folding knives, and I thought, I kind of like to try my hand at making folders. So all my folders, I strictly designed myself. I wasn't basing them on any other maker like I was with my hunting knives and Loveless. But I came up with some interesting variations, and I always sold everything I made, but I never really got any ink. I'm terrible at self-promotion, and
Yeah, a lot of a lot of people that are talented and just do enjoy what they're doing don't
yeah.
don't stand up on the soapbox and say, "Hey, look at me!" Right,
Well, yeah, and then,
right,
but I continued to make it because I loved it.
right. And you made a high quality and continue to make a really high quality, beautiful, artistic. It's not an
Well,
art knife,
just
but it clean lines,
clean lines. Yeah, I'll
thin,
go.
and it's not clunky, it's not overly heavy, and your pocket knives
Oh,
are lovely. I mean,
well,
we each have one that we keep. And that's special to have. The question that's come to mind, did having this knife making, which I hear was something that you were all in and intrigued you, it
yes,
it focused
I was
you, it
making
was something
something.
you enjoyed, you got to produce something. Did knife making help you deal with your full-time job? Was knife making an outlet that made other things better? Or
Um, to a small degree, perhaps, in the sense that it allowed me to concentrate on something else rather than dwelling on what had happened that day.
Mhm,
But when you have to go to work every day,
mhm.
because I was working full time, and I could expect the same toxic environment every day. It took a lot of joy out of me doing most everything. But I could always take refuge in the shop, you might say. And while I was making the knives, I did feel better. But there was still had to get up and go to work the next day.
Right, yeah. But even having that little bit of reprieve, like I said, something to focus on and not just,
Yeah, like I say,
yeah,
it was a distraction.
yeah,
It was something else to concentrate on. But
yeah,
right up until the time I went to bed, and then I started thinking about what's going to happen tomorrow.
right, right.
So, but I dealt with that, and I'm proud of myself for dealing with it the way I did. And bottom line was the effect didn't last because this person's successor didn't like what I did, and so therefore she took it upon herself to pick up the mantle and continue. So the last 5 years that I was there before I retired, and I retired from my job. I quit my boss. I didn't quit my job. I retired because I stuck it out until I got 30 years in. Got a nice pension back then,
Hmm.
benefits, and but I retired at age 55, and I would have probably stayed there another 10 years. So the knife making, and you talk about being deliberate and planned. This is where I diverged from that, because just at the time that I decided to retire, the leather knives happened, and it
Right.
was
Tell us
just
that story about that,
well,
because that was like a drop that, like, we talk about planting seeds and they come to fruition and you never know when. You didn't even
that's
know
right.
you
Yeah,
planted this seed 20 years ago.
no. In
Yeah.
fact, it was like 30. 35 years ago,
Yeah. So
maybe.
tell us about that.
Uh, a friend at work, and at the time I was working in the business office, which was a very good environment. And one of my coworkers asked me, he had a friend that was a saddle maker, and he asked me if his friend wanted to know if I would try to make him a head knife. Well, being that I was tuned into all things knives, I knew what a head knife was, but I didn't know about head knives.
So describe a head knife for the people that might not know what that is. What's a head knife?
Well, if you look at it in profile, it looks like a mushroom, with the stem being the handle and the rounded dome of the mushroom being the blade.
Okay.
It's half of a oval or half of a circle with a handle attached to the center bottom. I mean, it's all one piece, but
Right.
that's what it looks like. And it is the primary cutting tool for leather workers everywhere worldwide. The design of a head knife, and I've got a picture of an Egyptian cartouche taken from some building over there of sandal makers, and they're holding up a head knife. So
Wow.
that design has been around for 3,000 years or more, and God knows how long it took to get to that design. But the reason it's still here and still prized and used is because it works. So anyway, I ordered an inexpensive head knife from a vendor just to study it, look at it. And then I figured out a way to grind it, and I knew I wanted to taper grind it. They're very thin. They're only a 1/16 of an inch thick, but I had to taper grind that from the handle to the edge, and then make it sharp and make it comfortable to hold. And so I did. I made it and I gave it to him, and he said thank you, and that was it. And I didn't think of head knives for another 20 years. And what happened was, the same person that I made the knife for and 5 other people hired a master saddler to come up to my friend's shop and teach a saddle making class. Well, my friend had all the tools, so the teacher, the master saddler, didn't have to take any tools. And he handed him the knife that I made, and that's what he used all weekend. And I'm sorry, I thought I turned that off. Anyway, he used it all weekend, and he came up to my friend and he said, "Where did you get this head knife?" He said, I've been cutting on masonite, which is a very poor cutting surface, but that's what my friend had. He said, I've been cutting on masonite all weekend, and this knife is still sharp. And he said, well, my friend Terry Knipshield made that. He said, I got to meet that man. So my friend Don Frederick brought the entire class, and John Willemsman, the master saddle maker, sitting around the dining room table that we're talking at now. And he pointed his finger at me and shook it like a Norwegian grandmother and said, you don't know what you've got here. You need to start making these right away. He said, I've been making saddles for 30 years and I've never seen anything like this. And I said, well, thank you. I said, appreciate it. I'm glad you like the knife. He said, no, you don't understand. You need to start making these knives. So I thought about it and I thought, well, okay, I'll give it a try. But I was thinking, how many saddle makers could there be? It'll probably be saturated in a year or two maximum. Well, that wasn't true. I had no idea what the leather market was. And so it took me 4 months. I didn't take notes when I made that first one. It took me 4 months of trial and error to rediscover that edge, and then come up with a method to consistently grind the blades and make them all turn out the same every time.
Right, because for the first time, you're making a a
tool.
something you want to duplicate, right?
Yes,
You're more of a
it-
production thing,
that's
and
correct.
all the head knives are pretty much going to look the same, or they should look the same or
Well, they look
close.
yeah, they look very similar. And
Right.
it wasn't the shape that was the issue. It was the grind. It was the edge geometry. What is the correct angle and curve to that edge? Because it's a convex edge. It's not
Mhm.
a beveled edge at all. And in fact, your husband's got one.
So, right, so the convex edge, so that the edges are actually rounded out and then
Like an
into the
axe.
point. Yeah,
Like an
okay,
axe. Think of it as an axe, only it's only a 1/16 of an inch thick.
right, right.
And the convex edge helps that edge hold up when it's cutting through leather. If you get it too thin, the edge starts to break down.
Mhm.
Get it too thick, it won't cut the leather well. So there's that happy medium, that sweet spot, as it were, that you have to find and then reproduce every time. I didn't want some of my knives to be great and some so-so. I wanted them all to be good. So anyway, I started at that, and I soon found out that there are just saddle makers using head knives. There's clothing makers. There are horse tack gear makers. There's wallet makers, Bible cover makers, chaps, leather chaps, boot makers, shoe makers. I mean, anything that you see that's made of leather, they need a cutting tool to produce that. So
So when did you figure out the size of the market you were getting into? When did that realization show up?
at my first show in Sheridan, Wyoming. That's kind of like the equivalent of a guild show. As
Okay.
far as the leather community, people fly in from all over the world for that. In Little Sheridan, I mean, it's only 14,000 people. And there were leather artists there that were doing incredible work by anybody's standards. And fortunately, Don Frederick had also introduced me to another master saddler maker that I made a knife for, and he was at that show. And God bless him, he was sending people, he was teaching classes after the show, after the display. He was sending all the students over to my table. And I think I had, on my table at that time, I had 14 knives. And I had like a $3,000 show, which was bigger than any standard or regular knife show that I'd ever been to. And what happened after that is I listened to my customers. I'm trying to understand what they need to do the type of cuts they do, and then design a blade to meet those needs.
So is
And
this like improving on the head knife, or is this
No.
diverging to other tools?
Well, the improvement on the head knife was using good steel, which commercial makers are not using, good heat treatment, which commercial makers are not doing,
Mhm.
and finding that correct edge geometry. All right. That's what I had to offer. That's what was making my knives better than or set apart from others.
Right.
And as word got out, demand started to pick up, and it kept going. It kept going, and and then about 5 years ago, one very prominent leather instructor in England who teaches many classes and is followed in Europe and England. He heard about my knives, and this has all been word of mouth. I haven't spent 1 cent on advertising.
Right.
I didn't even have a website at that time. He somehow heard about me and ordered some knives, and he got them, and he was just blown away. I don't know what they're used to for tools over there, but apparently they weren't very good. And he did a YouTube video review of my knives, and then bam, I had a worldwide market overnight. And so now
Wow.
I'm literally selling around the world. I'm talking
Right.
Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Moscow, Transylvania. I even had a fellow in Transylvania, Romania, order a knife from me. I thought I was cool. I was tempted to ask him if he only worked at night, but I
Mhm.
figured he'd had enough vampire jokes to last him a life.
Yeah. Uh, And
So
you got to sell tools to the guy that manages and takes care of the horses for the queen, or the
yes, several, in fact. Samuel Belasco is in the Queen's Household Regiment Mounted Cavalry. There's two
we're
branches.
talking about Queen of England, just for
Queen of
everybody to
England.
know who we're talking
Yeah.
about. Which-
And if you ever have watched any royal affair, whether it be a wedding or a funeral, and you see all those black horses and the soldiers with red coats
Mhm.
and white hats, that's the Household Cavalry Mounted Regiment. And they're not just for looks. Every one of those men can fire a bazooka and ride it and drive a tank. They're special forces, you might say. But part of their job is the pomp and ceremony, and also to provide security. But they're soldiers. They're soldiers first. And even though they look elegant and everything is beautiful, don't let that fool you. These guys are just like the worst. They're the best Marines we can produce.
Mhm.
So he found out about it, and he gave me some undue credit. He was entering a competition over there for saddlers, and he took one or two first places and one best in the category, and he attributed it to my knives, which I thought was not good. I will say a good knife makes it easier for
Right.
anybody to do a better job.
Because of the quality of the tool he had, he was able to produce his very best work, and it took first place.
Exactly. He was able
Right.
to do better work, and that tickles me to death. If there's one thing that really gratifies me, is to hear a prominent leather worker, and there are more than you think out there,
Mhm.
but to hear them say, this has made my job so much easier, and I'm grateful, and that's what keeps me going.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I like to hear it. I like to know that I'm contributing, that I made someone's job a little bit easier, and they're happy about it.
Right.
The demand got out of hand. I can't
I
say no.
remember at some point when you were still fairly new into that, you were taking orders. And I remember
was.
talking with you at one of the shows we saw you at, probably Janesville,
Yep.
and you were like 200 orders behind, or some crazy number.
Well, that's just the start. It increased to about 800.
Wow.
At the time of the fire, the year ago, April, I had 800 orders pending. And to tell you the truth, I didn't look at that as an ego booster at all. I saw it as a very big point of stress for
Right.
me.
Right. Because you're
I can only make so much.
very
So
conscientious, and you do a really good job, and you are not wanting to have people wait on you, or
yes.
I understand that. I want to talk about two things. One, I
Yeah.
do want to touch on the fire, but I also remember before that you
Mhm.
had a really severe accident in the shop where you cut your hand horribly badly.
I did.
And I
I thought
remember, yeah,
I thought it was over.
that's what I remember, because I thought that you might stop then because of that
Yeah,
injury.
exactly. And what happened was, it was a head knife. and I was drilling a hole through, and these are hardened, this is hardened steel now.
Right.
So I was using a carbide bit, and the carbide bit, the blade was semi-sharp, but easily could cut flesh quite easily, but it wasn't head knife sharp, if you know what I mean. And it was in my drill press, and I was holding the handle down and coming down with the drill press, and it caught in the hole and spun that thing around at 800 RPM, and it sliced my hands from my finger to my wrist, half-inch deep. And I looked at my hand, and I just bent it a little bit, and it just gaped open, and I thought, oh my God. So I immediately made a fist, and we went to the emergency room, and first they stitched me up to keep it clean. Then they had to redo it during the surgery. And I still have numbness in my left pointer and middle finger, between those two fingers, but it hasn't affected my grip, range of motion, or strength, or anything. I still have all the dexterity 98% of the dexterity I had. And the way the doctor put it, he said, Terry, he said, how did he put that? You were in the tiger zone, but the tiger wasn't home. In other words, I was
so all the vital tendons that could have been cut weren't.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. If I'd have been 1/8 of an inch either direction,
Jiminy Christmas,
my hand would have been, I couldn't have used it.
Right.
So
when when that happened, and then you got stitched up and you went back and had surgery,
right.
What were your thoughts as far as your business, your life?
Yeah. I was devastated because I thought I'd have to give that up. At that point, I didn't know what kind of feelings or range of motion I would have with the hand, but the surgeons did a terrific job. In fact, you'd be hard pressed to see the scar in my hand. The cut was right along the lines that you would read in a palm reading session. It was right along the creases in your hand. And so I can touch my palm right now like this, and I can feel a little tingly, as opposed to the other hand. So the nerve didn't come back 100%, but enough so that I can do my work.
Right. Right.
But I was devastated. Yeah, I was, what am I going to do now? Yeah. So, but that turned out fine. And a lot of worrying for nothing, as it turned out to be.
Right. But when you don't know what you don't know going in, all of a sudden you have this tragedy, and it's like, we don't know what the future is.
Right.
That's a scary place to live.
It is. It was very scary for me. But it worked out. Not to sound cliche, but someone was looking out for me. It had to be. There are too many variables there that were just right so that it would not permanently affect me. Right. It's uncanny, really. So I like to think that the little something more was going on. At least that's me.
You were being watched over. Yeah,
I believe
that's cool. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And what year did you have the fire?
Last year.
Was it just last year?
Yeah, April of 2020.
Because I remember just how heartsick we were when we saw that. And I remember that you made a statement right then. It's like, I'm done. I'm not going to do this anymore.
Well,
and that's because we knew
I may have fudged on that and said I might not be doing this anymore.
Yeah.
Uh,
So tell
I
us about
couldn't
that.
let it go. I couldn't let it go at that point.
Okay.
Well, I was just in my shop is attached to the garage and is separated by a common wall. I had been cutting some steel with a abrasive wheel on a chop saw, and it was creating a lot of sparks. Now, at the time, the walls in both my shop and garage were that wafer board. It was wood. And my practice is whenever I do that sort of thing, I wait for 10 minutes. I look for smoke. I smell for smoke. I feel for heat. In other words, I check to make sure nothing's burning. Well, apparently an ember got between the floor and the paneling. And 2 hours later, I heard a thumping. And I looked out, I went in the backyard, see if somebody was messing with my shed in the back. No, I went back in the shop. I heard the thump again. And I came out, this time I turned left to go look at the garage, and there was smoke pouring out of it. And I thought, oh my God. So I ran to the back to get the hose. And at that point, I had very little coordination. I was just,
Yeah, you're panicked.
I was panicked. Yeah.
Right.
And by the time I got the hose to the front of the garage, I couldn't stand in front of it. It was that quick. And the fire department was here in a minute and a half. And by that time, it was gone already. That's how fast it was.
Wow.
And it melted the front of my car, all the plastic in the front of my car. It melted the back of our siding and it destroyed everything in the garage, which included 30 years of accumulated stuff. 3 heat treating ovens went up in smoke, various and sundry other things. And when we finally got a professional to start cleaning it out and we're trying to identify this stuff, how do you identify melted plastic and charcoal? Because that's basically all we could see. So we did the best we could. Insurance didn't, we took a hit insurance wise. It didn't cover what we thought it was because it cost us a lot more to build the garage. And of course, the shop and the garage had to all be demolished.
Right.
And we had to rebuild an entire structure, which is the same structure, except that everything is up on a 9-inch block now, according to code. It's resting on concrete, not on the slab. Concrete blocks, not on the slab.
Right.
And everything is up. We've got the most up-to-date coded structures in, I'd say, a 12 block square.
Right. Right.
Everything is up to code. Everything is as it should be. And it's basically fireproof. I mean, we put in drywall. There's fireproof other materials were used, and it's the garage is insulated now. It never used to be. The shop has always been good, and got to actually have a garage door opener we never had before. So it's,
what did you, as far as putting your shop back together?
Well, that was, it took me 11 months. I mean, for I'd say 10, 11 months, I wasn't making anything.
Right.
And here are 800 orders sitting there with people saying, when am I going to get my knife? And I'm having to write everybody and say, hey, I had a fire. I'm sorry, but I don't know when. I'll be back at it. And then when I was ready to start production again, I just made an announcement. I said, I'm sorry. You've been waiting a long time, but I'm canceling all orders. And that was hard for me to do.
That's a very, very risky thing to do. I mean, I understand that it was absolutely necessary.
Yes.
For you to get out from under the burden so that you could proceed.
I had to, yeah.
But to to make that, yeah, that's chilling because you don't know what the response is going to be.
Well, and that's what my worry was. And I didn't want to start over at the bottom of a very deep hole. I
Right.
wanted to start fresh. And so I said, and it's always been my policy not to take money in advance. I never took prepayments, partial payments, down payments, whatever you want to call it. I didn't charge anybody until the knife was finished and ready to mail. So nobody lost a penny.
Right.
They were disappointed that they weren't getting my knife. And believe it or not, most, not all, there's always the 1%ers, but 99.5% of people understood completely why and why I was doing this. And just recently, my son was kind enough to build a online store / website. And now I can make knives at my leisure when and how I want to make them. And I put them up for sale when they're finished. And I still get, when are you going to have this? When are you going to have that? I said, when I get them made. That's my standard answer. I don't have a schedule anymore. I'm working for Terry, and I'm not going to get myself bound up in a lot of stress again. I want to enjoy that. And yes, the online store is frequently, most of the time, in fact, it's out of stock, because no matter what business model I use, Christine, I can't keep up with demand. There's just no way.
Yeah.
And
And I'm really happy to hear that you made the choice that you're going to work for Terry.
Yeah.
That you get to make the knives you want to make at the pace you want to make them, because that's a backside of massive success, is it can turn from something wonderful into something devastating because it can control your life. And like you retired in 2006 at age 55, and it's like, you don't, you deserve to live some life.
I'll be 71. I'll be 71 in October, and I do have other interests. I like the metal detect. That's I get a real big kick out of that. So this way, I mean, I'm still working hard out there. I'm working on a batch now to restock the store.
Right.
And I'm just telling people, look, just check back once in a while in the store, see what's there, or don't. It doesn't make any difference to me. We don't need this income to live on. Is what the blessing is. We invested well. We've got good benefits, and we're debt free. We've lived being below our means our entire life, saved, invested, and we're okay. We're doing just great. And all of this just provides a little extra income. We can do things for the kids and for ourselves. And so that's fine. The only in a way, the fire was cleansing, if you understand it.
Absolutely.
It destroyed the physical things, but it also eliminated a lot of stress. And in fact, the timing couldn't have been better, because we got all our materials bid and bought before the big building material crunch happened.
Bonus.
So yeah, I
Right.
mean, people are paying dollars for a 2x4.
I know. Yeah.
And all of that, we got in just before that. So we were lucky. I have a brand new, wonderful workshop and facility. And the only thing, I think one of the things that affected me the most about the fire is how few people called. We were on the news. There was 5, 6 phone calls. And we've lived here all our lives. We know a lot of people. I was just really surprised and disappointed that we didn't get a few more calls. There was maybe 4 or 5 calls of people offering to help. What they could do, I don't know. They didn't know what I wanted to keep, what I had to be thrown. So I said, well, I appreciate it. Some offered storage space. And I said, I appreciate that. I think we're going to be okay, but I really appreciate you asking. That was 4 or 5 people.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, people we knew for 40 years, we saw them drive by the house to look at the damage and never stop to say, how are you guys doing? That really bothered me. That was,
What do you think was in that?
I don't know. I don't know if they were just uncomfortable or giving them the benefit of the doubt. Oh, we don't want to bother them. But it would have meant a lot at that time had we heard from a few people, how are you guys holding up? You know, are you, just give us a chance to vent a little bit, maybe, or to let them know how stressful it was, not expecting an answer or a solution, but just express the feelings going on. And that just really, I had to reassess quite a few friendships after that.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is it doesn't matter whether you can actually help or do anything or not, but
Yeah.
simply being and showing empathy and being an
Absolutely.
ear
Absolutely.
means a lot.
But
So bad.
that's over and done with now.
Mhm.
And but at the time it affected me. It was it damaged my calm. But we're okay. We're doing fine. And knives are being made, knives are being sold,
Mhm.
and life goes on. So
Yeah. So what's the future for you right now? What do you think you want to be doing and how long you want to be doing it?
well, that's an interesting question, because I have taken steps. I have had many people in the leather industry tell me that I've made a difference. Now, that's something you like to hear.
Yeah, that is.
And if I just quit, I'm thinking there's all those people that really appreciated what I've done, and I'm just cutting them off. But I don't want to do this forever. I won't be able to do it forever,
Right.
obviously. And so what I've taken steps to do is I've put out some feelers and said, look, I don't want this technology, trade secret, whatever you want to call it, to disappear when I stop making knives. I want somebody to be able to take up the baton and continue on. So I told a few people that, or just let it be known that, you know, if anybody wants to learn how I grind my knives for a fee, now I'm not going to give what I worked very hard for away for nothing.
Good job.
But for a reasonable fee, I will tell you everything you need to know about how to make a head knife. I think I mentioned before, there's tens of thousands of knife makers out there.
Right.
There are 5 in the world that are making leather knives. 5.
Wow. And
So
considering the demand that you had and what you're experiencing, there's room for a few more.
yes, there are. Yes, there are.
Yeah.
And there's no doubt about it. I mean, the caveat is that you've got to do a good job. I mean, you've got to make a product that works well if you want to continue to be in demand. So you have the responsibility to follow up and make a good product. Okay. I have no control over that. but I'll show you everything you need to know to do that. And what you do with that then is up to you.
Right.
So I can't guarantee anybody's success, but I can guarantee that you will learn how to make a head knife. So yeah, I want it to continue so the leather industry has a quality tool to fall back on, because they a very prominent saddle maker that was very high regarded in the industry told me once that the leather industry, and this was when I first started out, maybe 14 years ago. He said, Terry, the leather industry has been putting up with inferior tools for 75 years.
Yeah. Well, that's what just came to my mind right before you said that.
Yeah.
It's like your tool and what you make is so significant, because apparently the vast majority of tools out there are not very good.
They're not.
Crap.
They're not.
Right.
All the old names, there are still some old names that are out there that are still producing knives, but as what happens with many industries, the bean counters or accountants get involved and say, well, we can save money if we use this steel instead of that steel. And of course, they're not metallurgists. They don't know.
Yeah, they're using an
they're-
inferior
they're look-
product. Right.
They're looking at dollars instead of, is it going to do the job? Is
Right.
it appropriate steel?
Mhm.
And they're not. And so that's why an artisan or a maker that makes them by hand using quality materials, I don't think that they'll ever starve. I really don't. I mean,
Right.
there's going to be a market, and as I said,
Cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
that makes me so that's my plan. I'm going to continue doing this until I can. I got to do it at least for a while longer, because my son went to a great deal of trouble to build that website. And it works wonderfully now. It's a perfect venue for me to sell
Right.
my
Because
work.
you make what you want to make. It gets loaded to the website. The website
Yeah.
keeps track, and everything sells. And then when
Yep.
when it's out of stock, boom, we're done. So you don't have to worry about it. No back orders.
No
Right.
back orders.
Yeah.
I just have to make more for the store.
Yeah.
And my son took the statistics on when I offered those 70 knives, and I made the mistake, or I didn't know I was making a mistake, by announcing on Facebook, hey, I'm adding my 70 knives at 12 noon tomorrow. So 12 noon comes and I start adding things into inventory. And in 15 minutes, they were all gone. My son looked at the stats, and there were, in that 15 minutes, there were 7,000, maybe closer to 8,000 individual different requests or attempts to buy one of my
to
knives.
order. Wow.
And this isn't just one person trying.
No, these are all of these are unique.
8,000 unique tries to buy 70 knives.
But you're not in the business of satisfying or keeping up with demand. You're in the business of making a quality knife in the time that suits you, and not letting your business run you.
That's what it has morphed into, and maybe too late. I probably should have taken that attitude before, but I'm a pleaser. I like to please people. I like people to be happy with me. Hard for me to say no sometimes, and that's why my orders got so high.
Right.
Should have just said, sorry, I'm booked up. I got to fill some orders. But oh, okay, but it's going to be a long time. I don't care. All right. So.
Yeah. Well, there's always new things to learn in business, and
Yeah.
So I think kudos to you to getting to the point where you are now.
Yes,
from where you
agree.
were. Right.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. This has been lovely, Terry. I
Well, thank you.
appreciate you spending the time and chatting and telling us some of your experiences and your stories, and this is fabulous. Is there anything
Well,
that you would want to tell anybody that might be looking at maybe stepping into knife making? Because that is a thing right now with the Forged in Fire series. I
yep,
think the public awareness of custom knife making has just really exploded. And there's a lot of people that are wanting to
yeah.
be knife makers or dabble or play. What would you tell somebody who is thinking that, hey, maybe I want to do this?
Well, I'd say do it. If you want to do it as a business, you are going to have to produce some quality work. There's a lot to it. There's more than just, I think I'll be a knife maker tomorrow. Still have the passion. Go for it. I was extremely fortunate that the leather knives dropped in my lap, literally, just when I was retiring from my full-time job.
Yeah.
It was the timing was unbelievable. I think I had 2 or 3 weeks off work and was enjoying the downtime when I got a call. Can I bring my class over? I got a guy who wants to meet you and talk about your head knife. It couldn't have come at a better time.
Right.
But
And for you to hear him,
yes,
see what, because he was really kind of like in your face about this.
he was, because
Yeah.
he didn't think I was taking it seriously enough.
Uh-huh.
And like I say, how many saddle makers could there be? Well, it wasn't
Right.
just a saddle maker.
Right. Anybody
And
that touches leather needs one of these.
he pounded it. He pounded it into me that
Mhm.
you need to do it. And I think that the reason I succeeded, if you want to call it success,
It
is
is.
I was willing to take the risk.
Yeah.
I mean, I had 35 years of knife making experience, so I had that going for me. I just had to master a particular style of knife and make it better than anything else. And when I started making them, I didn't know if they would be well received in the leather community. And it turned out, heck yeah, make more.
Yeah.
We'll buy all you have.
This master saddle maker was not an anomaly. He was speaking for the industry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, go for it. Don't, you know, don't be afraid to take the risk, but be
Mhm.
reasonable about it.
Yeah.
Uh, and maybe make a list of what you want to get out of it. If it's just for money, you might be disappointed.
Right. Yeah. I agree. There has to be,
Yeah,
it has to be something that you enjoy doing, that there's some passion for.
absolutely. If the
Yeah.
passion is there, I would say you're going to succeed. If you've got the passion, you'll find a way to make it succeed.
Perfect. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
This is Coach Christine Clark. This has been Forging a Life with my guest, Terry Knipshield. Terry, thank you so much. This has been an absolutely delightful conversation. I appreciate you spending the time with me.
Well, I appreciate you having me. I uh, enjoyed it. It was good to see you again, even if it's virtually.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.